The pack doors slammed shut behind Annalise. The crack of wood against stone echoed across the courtyard like breaking bone. No one followed. No one stopped her. 18 winters inside Moonridge Pack ended with one command: exile. Cold wind swept through the valley, dragging the scents of pine, frost, and distant patrol wolves across the stone yard. Annalise stood at the bottom of the packhouse steps, still, breathing through the pressure tightening in her chest. A leather pouch hung from her left hand. 17 silver marks clinked softly together, her entire value to the pack. In her right hand she held the brittle parchment the elders had pressed into her palm, a territory claim, her inheritance. Her father had placed it in her hand without lifting his eyes. A wolf grown makes her own hunt. No anger colored his voice, only winter logic. Behind the rippled kitchen glass, her younger brother Thomas pressed his palm against the pane. His scent drifted faintly through the wind. Fear, salt, grief. She kept walking. Silver Creek marked the edge of neutral territory. The trading post smelled of wood oil, flour dust, and old wolf. Mr. Gable studied the parchment over the rim of his spectacles. His nose twitched, exile scent. His thumb rubbed the faded ink. The hollow fang claim. A slow breath escaped him. "My condolences for your grandmother." The parchment slid back across the counter. "That land is stone, no river, no prey trails. Packs ignore it." His gaze lifted to hers. Rogues hide in those caves when they want to disappear. Outside the window, the mountains rose in jagged grey ridges. Wild territory, unclaimed, dangerous. Annalise set the pouch on the counter. How much for an axe, a bow saw, flour, salt, and dried beans? Mr. Gable raised his brows. 17 marks won't last long out there. The coins slid across the worn wood. They only need to last until I start surviving. The old wolf studied her for several seconds. Pity faded from his scent. Respect replaced it. 2 days later, she reached her inheritance. The cliff rose from the valley floor like a blade of granite, grey, ancient. At its base yawned a cavern wide enough to swallow a wagon. Wind screamed through the ravine. Cold slid through her coat and into her bones. Annalise stared at the cave. This was the land no pack wanted. Stone, shadow, silence. She stepped inside. The wind vanished. The air remained cool and steady, sheltered. Her wolf senses adjusted slowly to the darkness. Then she heard it. Drip, drip, drip. Water echoed through the cavern. She followed the sound deeper inside. At the back of the cave, a clear drop of water fell into a shallow basin carved into the stone. Fresh water. Annalise crouched and pressed her palm against the rock wall. The granite held the warmth of the fading autumn sun. Winter would struggle to steal it. Her gaze moved slowly across the cavern. Food storage, animal shelter, fire protection. A cabin built across the entrance would seal the wind. 2 chambers, living space, storage. The cave revealed its secret. Resolve settled deep into her bones. She would survive here. The first week punished her body. Blisters split her palms beneath the axe handle. Her shoulders burned from dragging timber through the ravine. Every morning frost coated the stones. Every night the forest howled beyond the firelight. The first pine tree fell with a cracking groan that rolled through the valley. Annalise stood beside the fallen trunk, chest rising hard. The sound lingered in the mountains. Change. She learned leverage, rolling logs with branches, letting gravity drag weight downhill. By the end of the week, 12 stripped trunks lay stacked beside the cave. Stone foundations followed. 12 paces long, 8 paces wide, small, permanent. Her fire burned inside the cave while flour paste simmered in a dented pot. The meal tasted like ash. The rising walls tasted like victory. Far above the valley, a massive black wolf lifted his head. The forest below fell quiet. Alpha Kael of Ironclaw Pack stood along the northern border ridge when the wind shifted. A scent cut through the cold air. Female, young, Omega. His wolf stirred beneath his skin. The reaction irritated him. Kael's golden eyes turned toward the distant cliffs, the hollow Fang territory. No wolves lived there, yet the scent tugged at him again, stronger, persistent. His wolf paced restlessly inside his chest, drawn toward the valley. Below the cliffs, Annalise placed the final log into the wall of her growing cabin. She had no idea the most feared alpha in the northern territories had just caught her scent, or that the land everyone called worthless sat directly inside his hunting range, and alpha wolves did not ignore what entered their territory. Sooner or later, he would come to investigate, and when he did, Kael would realize the Omega building a home in his territory was the mate he should never have lost. Chapter 1. Morning came hard in Hollow Fang. Cold lived differently inside stone. It did not rush. It settled into the cave walls during the night and waited for dawn. Annalise woke with stiff fingers and ash on her sleeve. She lay still for a moment, staring at the thin line of light beneath the unfinished cabin wall. Wind slipped through the gaps in the logs with a slow, steady hiss. Her body ached, split palms, burning shoulders, a bruised knee from yesterday's fall on frozen rock. Pain sat inside her muscles like a second skeleton. She pushed herself upright. The cave smelled of ash, pine sap, damp stone, and last night's flour paste. Survival had its own scent. Smoke in her hair, sweat dried into her coat, stubbornness. Annalise fed the fire 2 narrow sticks, waited for the flames to catch, then crossed to the basin at the back of the cave and splashed water over her face. Cold slammed into her skin. Good. Weakness left faster that way. Outside, dawn painted the valley blue. Mountains rose silent around her land. Frost silvered the brush. Pine shadows stretched long across the ravine. Her half-built cabin crouched against the cave mouth. Uneven, rough, standing. That mattered. She stepped outside with the axe in one hand and rope over her shoulder. The cold struck first, then the silence. No pack voices, no morning fire, no patrol calls from the ridge, only the valley, only her boots crunching across frost. Moonridge had cast her out 7 days ago. 7 days was enough for the pack to continue without her, enough time for her sleeping place to be taken, enough time for Thomas to stop looking toward the door at supper. The thought settled beneath her ribs. Annalise dropped the rope beside the stacked logs and rolled her shoulders once. The tree she had cut yesterday lay near the foundation stones, too heavy to lift, too awkward to drag whole. She studied the slope, the A-frame she had built, the angle of the ground. Everything here required thought before strength. Good. Thinking cost less blood. She wedged one end of the log onto a branch and leaned her weight into it. The timber shifted, an inch, then another. Slow work. Sweat gathered between her shoulder blades despite the cold. By the time sunlight broke across the ridge, she had dragged the timber halfway to the lifting frame. Her hands trembled. She flexed them once and kept working. By midday, the log hung in the rope sling of the A-frame. She braced her boots and guided the timber toward the wall. The rope burned across her palms. The log slid into place with a heavy knock. Annalise stumbled back. Another row, another barrier against winter. Her breath came fast. Then the valley changed. Something watched. Annalise froze. The wind shifted across the ravine. Pine, stone, snow, wolf. Her pulse kicked hard, not rogue. Rogue smelled thin and unstable. This scent came deep and controlled. Cedar, iron, male dominance, pack, alpha, close. Annalise's hand closed around the axe handle. Every instinct inside her body woke at once. Lower your gaze. Guard your throat. Avoid challenge. Alpha scent pressed across the clearing with quiet authority. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, caught between submission and alarm. She scanned the ridge. Nothing moved. The brush remained still. The pines stood silent. The cliff watched without expression. Yet the scent remained, watching. Annalise stepped backward toward the cabin wall without turning her back on the valley. Her breathing had gone shallow. The axe felt small in her hands. An alpha did not need teeth to control a moment. Presence did the work. The scent lingered. Then the wind shifted again. Gone. Farther now. Annalise exhaled slowly. Ironclaw. The name rose with certainty. Moonridge lay 2 territories south. Silver Creek marked neutral ground. Hollow Fang touched the northern ridge few traders mentioned. Ironclaw ruled that ridge. Their alpha had a name every wolf knew. Kyle, warborn, unchallenged. A black wolf large enough to break rivals at the neck. Annalise looked at her half-built wall. The stacked wood, the tracks her boots had carved into the dirt. This land felt less abandoned now. She swallowed and lifted the next log. Fear would not finish the cabin. If an alpha had scented her, 2 choices existed: leave, or become too rooted to remove. She chose the second. Clouds rolled across the mountains by afternoon. The valley darkened early. Annalise worked faster. Mud and dry grass filled the cracks between the lower logs. She packed the mixture hard until the wind stopped slipping through the wall. Then she hauled flat stones from the ravine for the fireplace base. Each stone fought her. Some she carried against her chest. Others she rolled across the ground with branches. By the time the final stone tipped into place beside the cliff wall, blood had reopened the blisters in her palms. She stared at the blood, bright, fragile. Then she wiped it on the dirt and lifted the next stone. Evening crept over the valley. Somewhere beyond the ridge a wolf howled. Short, sharp, a patrol signal. Another wolf answered minutes later. Ironclaw. Annalise kept working. No one came, no brush snapped, no shadow crossed the ridge. Still, tension remained. Inside the cabin frame she knelt beside the hearth and struck flint against steel. Dry moss caught. Twigs followed. A small flame rose between the stones. Heat spread slowly. Annalise sat back and watched the fire. Fire changed a place. It made survival feel real. Her throat tightened. She focused on the flames until the feeling passed. This valley had taken blood and labor from her. At least it had not lied. She fed another stick into the fire. Then she heard it. A scrape. Outside. Annalise froze. Wind did not make that sound. Another scrape. Closer. She reached for the knife at her belt. Silence fell. Annalise rose slowly and moved toward the doorway gap. A shadow crossed the clearing. Large, heavy, controlled. Black fur entered the edge of dusk. The wolf stepped forward. Massive. Shoulders level with her chest. Eyes gold even in fading light. No growl. No rush. Only power. Instinct pressed down her spine with crushing weight. Her wolf recoiled, then trembled, then leaned toward him again with confused fascination. The black wolf stopped 3 strides from the doorway. His nostrils flared. Smoke. Blood. Female. Exile. Annalise kept the knife low but ready. The wolf stepped closer. Firelight touched his fur. Gold eyes locked on hers. Heat moved suddenly beneath her ribs. Strange, dangerous. Her grip tightened. The wolf's gaze dropped to the knife, then lifted again. A silent challenge. Annalise swallowed. "If you came to take this land," she said quietly, "you should have come before I built on it." The wolf watched her, then stepped forward again. 1 pace, closer to the fire, closer to her. His scent reached her fully now. Snow, cedar, dominance. The wolf inhaled slowly. His body went still. Something in that reaction felt violent. Annalise fought the urge to cover her throat. Heat flickered inside her chest. Recognition with no explanation. The wolf shifted. Bone rolled. Fur vanished. A man rose from the wolf's shape, tall, scarred, powerful, black hair falling to his shoulders, golden eyes unchanged. Alpha Kale stood in the doorway of her unfinished cabin. Annalise held her ground. Every nerve in her body screamed for distance. Still she remained. Kyle's gaze moved to the blood on her palm, then across the rough walls she had built. When he spoke, his voice settled low between them. "You built this alone?" "Yes." His eyes moved over the timbers and stone hearth, then returned to her. This territory borders Ironclaw. I know that now. You stand inside my hunting range. This cave belongs to me. His gaze sharpened. I did not ask who gave it to you. The words landed quietly. Their weight pressed into the room. Kyle stepped farther into the firelight. The cabin shrank around him. His gaze lowered to the knife. You would use that on me? If I had to... His mouth shifted slightly. You would try. Heat rose in her face. Outside, wind swept through the ravine. The fire snapped. Kyle inhaled again. This time his reaction tightened, his eyes fixed on hers. Who rejected you? The question struck deep. Annalise straightened. That is not your concern. It becomes my concern when an exile carries her scent across my border, then stop breathing so close. Silence fell. Kyle studied her. Something changed in his scent. Male awareness, focused, dangerous. A distant howl echoed from the ridge. Ironclaw wolves calling their alpha. Kyle did not look away. Lock your door tonight, he said. I do not have one. His eyes moved briefly to the open doorway. You should. He turned and stepped into the dark. Moments later, the sound of shifting bone followed. Wolf again. Then silence. Annalise stood in the doorway listening. The valley had changed. Kyle knew where she lived. He knew she was alone. And when he had breathed her scent, something inside her had answered. The cave no longer felt like a fortress. It felt like the first place the Alpha of Ironclaw would return to. Chapter 2. Annalise did not sleep. The fire burned low beside her. The hide across the doorway snapped whenever wind slipped through the gaps in the wall. Each sound pulled her eyes open again. Kyle's scent remained in the cabin. It clung to the timber he had stood beside, to the stones around the hearth, to the air she kept pulling into her lungs. Snow, cedar. Male dominance held under iron control. Each time she caught it, heat flickered beneath her ribs. She fed the fire more wood. Flames rose. Shadows shifted across the walls. The knife remained across her lap. Outside, wolves called once across the ridge, a patrol signal. Then silence returned, thin, waiting. By dawn, her eyes burned with exhaustion. She crossed the cabin and tore the hide aside. Morning arrived grey and bitter. Frost glazed the clearing. Smoke drifted from the dying fire and vanished against the cliff. The valley looked unchanged. It wasn't. Annalise stepped outside and saw the tracks. Wolf prints cut through the dirt around her cabin. Large, deep, unhurried. Kyle had circled the clearing after he left, once near the stacked timber, once along the cliff wall, once close enough to the doorway that the edge of his paw print overlapped her boot mark. Her throat tightened. He had not needed to force entry. He had only needed her to know he could return. Annalise crouched beside one of the prints. The track dwarfed her hand. Alpha, territory, warning. Her pulse steadied. Fear sharpened decisions. She rose, took the hatchet, and cut 2 more pine poles from the grove below the ravine. By mid-morning she had reinforced the doorway with thicker timber and packed brush between the lower wall gaps. It would not stop an alpha. It would stop everything else. Then she climbed the ridge above the cave. From higher ground the valley revealed its shape. The ravine narrowed toward the north, forcing anything entering through 2 stone corridors lined with scrub pine. Her cabin sat lower than she liked. The cliff protected her back. The approach remained visible from both sides, a defensible den. The thought settled firmly inside her. She would need traps, more wood, a stronger door, a bow if she could ever barter for one. Her gaze moved north. The ridge waited dark beneath the clouds. Ironclaw territory. Yesterday it had felt distant. Now it felt close enough to breathe. Annalise climbed down and returned to work. By noon she had split kindling, sealed new cracks in the wall, and hauled more stone for the hearth. Blood reopened along her palms. She wrapped one hand in rope and ignored the sting. Work kept memory away, mostly. Thomas still appeared when she least wanted him, his hand on the glass, his scent breaking on the wind, the way she had not turned back. Annalise shoved a stone into place and stood breathing hard. Moonridge would not follow her here. She stepped outside again. The valley had gone still. Her body felt it first. No birds, no brush movement, no small creatures beneath the frost. Predators silenced places by entering them. Annalise's hand closed around the hatchet. A raven burst from the trees. A moment later, 2 wolves stepped from the ravine. Neither was Kael. They moved side by side, grey-backed and broad through the shoulders. Ironclaw. They stopped 10 strides from the cabin and shifted. Bone rolled, fur vanished. Men stood where the wolves had been. Both carried knives. The older one had a scar across his jaw. The younger one stood broader, his expression blank in the way of wolves trained not to show challenge. Annalise did not retreat. The older male studied the cabin, the stacked wood, the hearthstones. Then her. "You're the exile. I have a name. I did not ask for it." The insult landed flat. She gave him nothing. The younger wolf glanced toward the cliff wall and the unfinished chimney. Curiosity touched his scent. The older one smelled only of discipline. "The alpha sent us to see what you're building." He saw it already. A flicker crossed the younger wolf's mouth, gone quickly. The older one did not react. "You're close to Ironclaw hunting lines. This claim came from Moonridge elders. Moonridge holds no authority here. Then your alpha can take that argument to them." He stepped forward. Dominance pressed across the clearing. Not Kyle's level, still strong enough to make her wolf shift uneasily. He is not in the habit of carrying disputes south for exiled Omegas. Omega. The word dropped like a stone. Annalise let it rest between them. "Then it's interesting he sent wolves to my door." Silence followed. The younger male hid a reaction poorly. The older wolf's scent sharpened. "Careful." "Why?" Annalise asked quietly. "Will Ironclaw drag me off land I bled for because your alpha dislikes seeing me here?" His jaw tightened. Submission had been expected. Instead he found a female with split hands, mud on her hem, and a cabin rising behind her. The younger wolf looked at her again, more carefully. Respect edged into his scent. The older male noticed. He stepped half a pace forward, reclaiming authority. "You stay clear of the North Ridge," he said. "No traps past the ravine, no fires after moonrise, no crossing patrol scents. And if I need game, you hunt where the valley allows. There's little game here." "That isn't Ironclaw's concern." Her laugh came dry. "Convenient." The younger wolf spoke. "If you keep your scent markers near the cliff, most patrols will leave you alone." The older wolf shot him a look. He ignored it. Annalise watched him. "Most?" she asked. "Some wolves dislike surprises. And your alpha?" The air changed. The older male's face hardened. The younger one hesitated just long enough to answer without words. "Interesting. Our alpha's decisions are not your concern," the older wolf said. Annalise adjusted her grip on the hatchet. "Tell him this. I won't cross Ironclaw land. I won't steal pack game. I won't trouble patrols." The wolf waited. "But I'm not leaving." The younger wolf's mouth twitched again. The older one studied her several seconds, then nodded. "Then survive quickly." He shifted. The younger wolf followed. Before the change finished, he glanced back. "Build a real door." Then they were gone. Grey wolves vanished into the ravine. Annalise waited until their scent faded. Then she returned to work. The afternoon passed beneath a low sky. She split timber until her wrists burned. Anger helped the work. Kyle had sent wolves instead of coming himself. Distance, control, hierarchy, good. Let him keep it that way. She drove the chisel into a beam. The wood split cleanly. By late afternoon the doorframe stood, crude, heavy, real. She hauled the planks upright using rope and leverage. When the final crossbar slid into place, she stepped back. A door, ugly, solid, survival. Satisfaction flickered through her chest. Then the wind shifted. Kyle. She recognized the scent instantly. Not his body, not his footsteps. Only his presence carried across the clearing. Snow, cedar, dominance. Annalise kept one hand on the door. She looked slowly toward the ridge. Nothing moved. Only stone, only dying light. Still the scent remained. Watching. Her pulse jumped once. She hated that her body had begun learning him. Annalise lifted her chin toward the ridge. It closes now. Silence answered. Then a single deep wolf call rolled down the cliff. Not threat, something closer to recognition. The sound moved through her like an unwanted touch. When the echo faded, his scent was gone. Night came early. She barred the door, fed the fire, boiled beans in cloudy water. Snow drifted through the dark outside. Then came the knock. 3 heavy blows against the new door. Annalise stood instantly, knife in hand. The bar held. Another strike. Wood shuddered. Open, a male voice called. Not Kyle. Younger, rough, rogue confidence. Annalise did not move. Who is it? A laugh answered through the wood. Trouble if you keep me waiting. Rogue, or worse. A male who expected fear from a lone female. The knife felt small again. Her gaze moved across the cabin. Hearthstones, hatchet, the narrow cave throat behind her. Another strike shook the door. Open. Annalise backed one step. If the door broke, she would get seconds. One cut, one blind strike, one run into the stone corridor behind the cave. Snow whispered outside. Then the air changed, violently. A second scent cut through the clearing. Snow, cedar, alpha. Silence slammed down. No third knock came. No laughter. Only one sharp sound outside. A body hitting frozen ground. Annalise stopped breathing. A low rumble followed. Command in its rawest form. A male voice answered, panicked. I didn't know. The words ended with a violent impact. Silence followed, complete. Annalise moved toward the door. Her hand hovered near the bar. On the other side of the wood, Alpha Kyle waited, and even through the door she could feel the heat of his presence. Chapter 3. Annalise kept her hand on the bar. The wood beneath her palm felt rough, solid, new. On the other side of the door, Alpha Kyle waited. She could feel him through the timber, snow, cedar. Power held tight enough to sharpen the air. No sound came from outside now. No struggle, no mocking voice. Only snowfall whispering across the wall. The silence pressed harder than the knocking had. Annalise slid the knife into her left hand and lifted the bar. The timber scraped free. For one brief moment she considered leaving the door closed. A foolish thought. If Kyle wanted entry, wood would not stop him. She pulled the door open. Cold rushed in first. Then Kyle. He stood in the snow, bareheaded, black hair damp with melting flakes. A dark coat hung open across his shoulders. One hand rested loosely at his side, the other held a man by the throat. The rogue's boots scraped weakly against frozen ground. Blood darkened the corner of his mouth. One eye was already swelling shut. Kyle did not look at the male. His eyes stayed on Annalise. Did he touch the door before he spoke? The question landed clean between them. Annalise studied the rogue, then Kyle's hand around his throat, then Kyle's face. Yes. Kyle nodded once. His grip tightened. The rogue choked. I didn't know it was yours, he rasped. Kyle's expression did not shift. It isn't. The words came quiet. Their weight did not. The rogue swallowed. She's alone, he gasped. No pack mark, no male scent except... Kyle slammed him into the wall. The cabin shuddered. Pain tore from the rogue's throat. Kyle leaned closer. Controlled, lethal. You smelled me, Kyle said. And you knocked anyway. The rogue's panic spiked sharp in the air. Annalise watched the scene with terrible clarity. No shouting, no wasted movement, just a stronger predator deciding what happened. The rogue's eyes rolled toward her. Tell him, he gasped. Tell him I didn't get in. Kyle's gaze moved to her. That was worse. Being seen by him in this moment felt like stepping into the center of a hunt she did not understand. Her throat tightened. He didn't get in. Kyle watched her another beat. Then he dropped the rogue. The male hit the ground and scrambled backward through the snow, clutching his bruised throat. Kyle looked down at him. If I sent you near this cave again, he said quietly, I will break your spine before you reach the door. The rogue nodded frantically. He shifted mid-stumble and fled in wolf form, brown fur ripping through skin as he bolted into the trees. Silence followed. Snow drifted across the doorway. Kyle remained where he was. Annalise still held the knife. His gaze dropped to the blade, then lifted to her again. You open your door too slowly. The words carried quiet authority. Annalise tightened her grip. You knock too late. Something shifted at the edge of his mouth. Recognition. He stepped forward, one pace. Snow fell between them. Heat reached her before he crossed the threshold. Her cabin shrank around him. His gaze moved once over her face, then lower. Her throat, the loose braid over her shoulder, the split skin across her knuckles. His scent deepened. Male, focused, troublingly aware. The door held, she said. Kyle glanced at the bracing. Barely. It held. A faint change touched his expression. You measure victory in narrow margins. It is still victory. His eyes stayed on hers. Yes. The agreement made him more dangerous. Annalise suddenly felt everything. The fire at her back, the cold at her feet, his gaze returning again and again to the hollow of her throat. She stepped aside. If you're staying out there, close the door yourself. Kyle looked at the space she made. Then he stepped inside. The cabin shrank further. Firelight slid across the scars on his ribs. Melted snow tracked down his skin. Annalise shut the door and dropped the bar. The sound landed heavy. Locked room, lone female, alpha inside. The air thickened. Kyle studied the room once. The finished door, the new bracing, the packed wall seams, the pot over the fire. Nothing escaped him. You worked all day. Yes. After not sleeping, Annalise stiffened. You watched my cabin. I watched my border. The correction came instantly. She met his eyes. You circled my clearing. He did not deny it. You left your scent on the wall. It kept lesser wolves away. Her pulse jumped. He had done it deliberately. So that was kindness? She asked. No. He stepped closer to the fire. Light deepened the gold in his eyes. It was efficiency. She wanted to resent the answer. Part of her didn't. His gaze returned to her hands. Show me. She did not move. What? Your palms. Alpha command. Used to obedience. Annalise kept the knife in one hand and raised the other. Blood had dried across the cracks in her skin. Kyle studied the damage. His jaw tightened. Sit. I'm fine. You are bleeding through your grip. She looked down. The knife handle carried a dark streak. Annoyance flared. Annalise set the knife on the table and sat. Kyle crouched in front of her. The shift came fast. One moment he dominated the room. The next he was level with her hands. That was worse. Her breath stalled. Heat rose into her throat. Kyle untied the rope wrap from her palm. His hands were large, scarred, built for violence. Instead, they moved carefully across her skin. Annalise watched him. The dark strands of his hair, the focus in his face, the warmth in his scent the longer he stayed this close. Nothing about this felt safe. Kyle lifted her palm toward the firelight. His thumb hovered near the split skin. Not touching, close enough that her body noticed. "You should have cleaned this. I was busy building a door." His gaze lifted. "I noticed." Annalise's pulse faltered. He poured hot water into a bowl and dipped a cloth inside it. Then he looked at her once before pressing the cloth to her palm. Pain flashed sharp. She jerked. Kyle caught her wrist, firm, controlled. "Hold still." She obeyed, despite herself. Steam rose between them. Firelight slid across his knuckles as he cleaned the wounds. "You order strangers in their cabins often?" she asked. "I order anyone bleeding in front of me." "So this is another border efficiency?" Kyle rinsed the cloth. "No." The word stayed between them. He turned her hand in his grip. His thumb shifted against her wrist. The contact sent a sudden pulse through her. Kyle froze. The cloth remained pressed to her palm. His head lifted slowly. Their eyes met. He had felt it too, not the same way, but enough. The gold in his gaze darkened. Something primal shifted beneath his control. Then the door shook, once, hard. Kyle moved instantly, rising and placing himself between her and the door. Another impact struck the wood. A voice called from outside. "Kyle, male, Ironclaw, urgent." Kyle did not look away from the door. "What?" "Movement on the south line. Moonridge sent." The words struck Annalise like ice. Moonridge. Kyle turned just enough to look at her. Nothing softened in his expression. The air changed anyway. "What kind of movement?" he asked. 3 wolves, 1 elder. Moving toward the ravine. Annalise rose slowly. Moonridge here meant one thing, trouble. Kyle's eyes stayed on hers. His voice dropped low. "Do not open this door for anyone but me." The command landed heavy. Annalise should have refused. Instead, she asked, "Why is Moonridge on my land?" Kyle reached for the bar. "That," he said, "is what I'm about to learn." He opened the door. Night rushed in. The younger wolf waited outside, snow in his hair. Kyle stepped into the storm, then stopped, looked back once. His eyes moved to her injured hands, then to the knife she had set aside. "Bar it behind me." Then he shifted and vanished into the snow. Annalise stood in the doorway. Moonridge scent drifted faint through the wind. Her old pack had found her, and Alpha Kyle was already running to meet them. Chapter 4. The door closed behind Kyle. Annalise dropped the bar into place. The timber settled with a dull knock. Locked. Snow thickened outside. Inside, the fire snapped softly. Annalise stood in the center of the cabin and listened. Nothing. No wolves, no voices. Only wind sliding through the ravine. Moonridge scent still lingered faintly in the clearing. Old pack, old law, old rejection. She crossed to the table and picked up the knife. The handle still carried the smear of her blood. Kyle's scent lingered strongest near the hearth, snow, cedar, male authority that refused to soften. Her hand hovered over the spot where he had crouched earlier. Then she pulled it away. Focus. Moonridge had come. That meant decisions. Annalise moved to the gap between 2 logs and looked out into the night. Snow blurred the valley. Tracks would vanish quickly. But scent did not lie. 3 wolves, 1 elder, authority. Her jaw tightened. They had cast her out. Now they crossed her land. A wolf call rolled faint across the ridge. Ironclaw. Another answered. Closer. Kyle. The sound tightened something in her chest. Somewhere beyond the ridge, Kyle had met Moonridge, and the valley had gone quiet because of it. Annalise stepped back from the wall. Waiting would do nothing. She slid the hatchet through her belt and kept the knife in her hand. Her injured palms protested when she tightened her grip. Good. Pain sharpened thought. She lifted the bar and opened the door. Cold struck immediately. Snow fell thicker now. The clearing had begun to disappear under white. Kyl's tracks still cut across the ground toward the ravine. Large, certain, unhurried, Annalise followed. The ravine narrowed as she climbed. Stone walls rose on both sides, trapping wind and scent. Her breath steamed in the cold. Moonridge scent strengthened with every step. Pack musk, territory oil, authority. Her throat tightened. Memories pressed forward. Moonridge fires, training runs. Thomas laughing beside the river. She crushed the images before they formed. Those wolves had watched her leave. They had not followed. Now they walked her land. The ravine curved. Voices carried ahead. Male, controlled. Annalise slowed. Another step, then another. The trees thinned near the ridge clearing. She crouched behind a snow-covered rock and looked down. 4 wolves stood in the open. 3 carried Moonridge scent. The 4th stood larger. Black, still, Kyle. He faced them without moving. The Moonridge elder stood opposite him in human form. Silver hair, broad shoulders, cold eyes. Elder Varric, the same wolf who had presided over her exile. Varric spoke first. You harbor one of ours. Kyle remained still. She crossed my land. She belongs to Moonridge. She was cast out. Snow drifted between them. Varric's gaze hardened. Pack matters do not end at the border. They end where your authority does. The elder's scent sharpened. She returns with us, Kyle answered immediately. No. The words struck like stone. Moonridge wolves shifted uneasily. One stepped forward. Kyle's wolf pressed against the surface. Dominance rolled across the clearing. The Moonridge wolf stopped moving. Varric's eyes narrowed. You claim every stray who crosses your territory. I claim control of my land, then remove her. No. The elder studied him. Then his voice cooled further. She is weak. Kyle said nothing. She has no wolf worth keeping. Still silence. She drains resources. The words cut through the clearing. Annalise felt them land. Kyle moved. 1 step forward. Snow crushed beneath his boot. Moonridge wolves lowered their gaze. Instinct. Varric did not. She built a cabin in 3 days, Kyle said. Varric's lip curled faintly. Desperation. Endurance. The correction came quiet. Sharp. Kyle's gaze hardened. You cast out a wolf who survives winter stone. The elder held his stare. She survives because Ironclaw shelters her. That was her doing. Snow thickened. Annalise watched Kyle carefully. He had not once said her name, not once claimed her, yet he stood between her and the pack that discarded her. Varric spoke again. You grow sentimental. Kyle's eyes went cold. I grow territorial. The air shifted. Pack law carried weight. Territory carried more. Varric's shoulders stiffened. You would challenge Moonridge for a rejected Omega? Kyle stepped forward again. 10 paces separated them now. I challenge any wolf crossing Ironclaw without invitation. Moonridge wolves shifted again. Varric measured the distance, measured Kyle, measured the ridge. They were outmatched, even if Kyle stood alone. Then Varric's gaze shifted, directly to the rock where Annalise crouched. Come out, she rose slowly. Snow slid from the rock as she stepped into the clearing. Moonridge wolves turned toward her. Their expressions cut deeper than claws. Disgust, dismissal, certainty that exile had been correct. Kyle did not turn, but his presence shifted. He knew she had moved. Varric studied her. You followed. I live here. You live nowhere. The words struck clean. Annalise held his gaze. You came to my door. You will return with us. No. The answer came instantly. Moonridge wolves tensed. Varric's voice hardened. You carry pack blood. You threw it away. Snow fell harder. The elder stepped closer. Do you think Ironclaw will protect you forever? I protect my land. Varric laughed. Short, cold. Your land. A growl rolled across the clearing, low, violent. Every wolf froze. Kyle turned slowly. His gaze moved first to Varric, then to Annalise. Gold burned in his eyes. "You stand on Ironclaw territory," he said quietly. Varric's mouth tightened. "I stand on disputed ground." Kyle stepped forward. "No." The word carried final weight. "You stand on my land." Silence crushed the clearing. Varric studied him one last time, then turned away. "Come," he ordered his wolves. They shifted immediately. Grey wolves replaced human shapes. Within seconds they vanished into the snow. Only Varric lingered. His gaze rested on Annalise. "You will regret refusing your pack." Then he shifted and disappeared into the storm. The clearing emptied. Only two figures remained. Annalise, Kyle. Snow fell between them. Neither spoke. Kyle finally turned toward her. "You ignored my order, yes." His gaze moved to the hatchet at her belt, then the knife in her hand, then the bandage wrapped around her palm. "You came armed. I came prepared." A pause stretched between them. Then Kyle stepped closer, one pace. The same step that shrank her cabin. Now it shrank the clearing. "You will not do that again." Annalise held his gaze. "Follow trouble. Follow me." Her pulse jumped. "That depends." Kyle's eyes narrowed slightly. "On what?" She did not look away. "Whether you plan to keep standing between me and my old pack." Silence settled. Snow gathered on Kyle's shoulders. Then he spoke. "I plan to keep Moonridge out of my territory." The answer carried two meanings. Annalise heard both. Kyle glanced once across the ravine, then back to her. "Go back to your cabin, and you?" "I hunt." The word rolled low, predatory, final. Annalise studied him one last moment. Then she turned and walked down into the ravine. Behind her, the alpha of Ironclaw remained in the snow, watching. And for the first time since exile, the most dangerous wolf in the north had chosen a side. Chapter 5. Annalise made it halfway down the ravine before she noticed her hands shaking. Not from the cold. Snow gathered on her lashes. The knife handle slipped slightly in her palm. She tightened her grip until the sting steadied her and kept walking. Behind her, Kyle remained somewhere above the ridge. Hunting. The word had settled beneath her skin the moment he said it. Low, controlled, final, not a promise to kill, a promise to find. Her cabin emerged slowly through the snowfall, first the cliff, then the rough roofline, then the door she had built that morning. Ugly, solid, too thin for everything pressing toward her life. Moonridge had found her. Kyle had refused them. The valley no longer belonged to silence. Annalise stepped inside and barred the door. The cabin held the last warmth of the fire. Smoke and damp timber wrapped around her. Kyle's scent lingered near the hearth, faint beneath ash and melting snow. She set the knife on the table. Then she stood in the center of the room and listened. Nothing. No wolves, no footsteps, only wind moving across the cliff. Moonridge had crossed a border to retrieve something they once called useless. That meant Hollow Fang mattered. Or she did. Neither answer felt safe. Annalise fed the fire until fresh flames rose through the coals. Light crawled across the log walls. The cabin answered with small creaks and settling timber. Outside, wind dragged across the ravine in long breaths. She should sleep. Instead, she found herself looking at the spot where Kyle had crouched earlier, his head bent over her torn palms. Annoyed with herself, she grabbed the pot and poured water into it harder than necessary. He had stood between her and Moonridge. That did not make him safe. She hung the pot over the flame. 3 nails had loosened in the upper brace. She took the hammer and drove them deeper. Each strike rang through the cabin. Work helped. By the time the brace held firm, the pot had begun to steam. She added a handful of dried beans. The smell barely stirred hunger. A sound outside froze her. Not a knock, a scrape, low, heavy, deliberate. Annalise reached for the knife. Another scrape moved along the wall beside the stacked timber. Then silence. She crossed to the log seam and looked outside. Nothing. Snow erased the clearing. The stacked timber crouched under frost. The pines held still. Then a shape crossed the edge of the clearing. Large, black. Her breath caught. Kyle. He moved through the snowfall in wolf form without hurry. His shoulders rolled beneath thick black fur. Gold eyes caught the firelight through the cracks in the wall. Blood darkened one side of his neck. Annalise lifted the bar before thinking. The door opened. Cold rushed in. Kyle stopped 3 strides from the threshold. Snow clung to his coat. Blood stained one foreleg. The wound along his neck had begun to clot, but more marked his shoulder. Annalise gripped the door. What happened? The wolf watched her. Then he stepped inside. Power entered with him. The cabin shrank again. Firelight moved across black fur and muscle. The scent of blood reached her next. Hot, metallic, under cedar and snow. Annalise shut the door. Kyle shifted. Bone rolled. Fur withdrew. A man replaced the wolf. He stood near the hearth, naked except for blood and the steam rising from his skin. Annalise looked once, then away. A long claw mark cut across his ribs. Another split the shoulder. Fresh blood traced older scars. "Moonridge?" she asked. Kyle pressed cloth against his shoulder. "2 scouts. You said 3 wolves and an elder. That is what reached the border." His voice remained steady. Annalise understood. The others stayed back. "Did you kill them?" Kyle lifted his eyes. "1." The answer held no pride, no regret. Annalise stepped closer to examine the wound. That realization struck her a moment later. She had stepped closer. Kyle noticed. His gaze dropped briefly to the shortened distance between them. "You should not open the door without asking who stands outside," he said. "You bled on my clearing." A pause. "And that justified foolishness?" "It justified checking whether the alpha guarding my border was dying beside my firewood." Kyle glanced down at the blood on the floor. Tragic. The dry tone almost made her smile. Almost. Annalise took a clean strip of cloth. "You're staining my cabin." Kyle watched her. "Concern? Labor? You built the wall. I'm not letting you ruin it. Then stop inviting wounded predators inside." She dipped the cloth into hot water. "When you stop arriving bleeding." Kyle went still. Then he held out his arm. "Allowance." Annalise stepped closer. The injuries looked worse in the firelight. The claw marks along his shoulder ran deeper than she expected. Heat radiated from his skin. Male heat. Battle heat. She pressed the cloth against the wound. Kyle did not flinch. His gaze stayed on her face. "That scout fought well," she said. "He died badly." She cleaned the blood slowly. "Why send scouts after the elder left to test the ridge, to reach me?" Silence. "Then, to reach what stands on my land." Her hand paused. The wording mattered. "Not you, not the cave, what stands on my land." Annalise rinsed the cloth. "You keep saying that." "What? My land?" Kyle's eyes lowered briefly to her mouth before lifting again. "It is. This cave was deeded to me. You live in it." The words struck deeper than they should have. Annalise pressed the cloth harder against the wound. Kyle's nostrils flared. "You punish everyone you treat?" he asked. "Only arrogant males. You have a narrow audience." The corner of her mouth almost moved. The cabin heat changed. Firelight moved across his shoulders. Snow melted slowly in his hair. The closeness between them thickened. Annalise felt it. The steadiness of his body, the control beneath the violence, the way his scent shifted every time she leaned closer. Her breathing changed first. Kyle's gaze dropped to her throat. Stayed there. The room narrowed. Annalise set the cloth aside. "What happened to the other scout?" "He ran, because you let him, because I wanted him afraid." The honesty sent cold through her spine. Kyle leaned against the wall beside the hearth. "You ignored my order," he said. "You mentioned that you followed armed. I found my old pack on my ridge. You found me handling it." Annalise's pulse quickened. "You don't decide when I stand still." "No." The word landed softly, then harder. "I decide when danger reaches my border." She stepped back. Kyle caught her wrist, instant, firm. Her body reacted before thought, heat, awareness. The Alpha could stop her with one hand. Both went still. His grip tightened slightly, enough to feel her pulse. Kyle looked at their joined hands, then lifted his gaze. Something dark moved in his eyes. Recognition. Predatory, too aware. The fire cracked between them. Annalise pulled her hand free. Kyle let her. That was worse. She moved to the far side of the table. "You said one scout died." "Yes." "And the elder?" "Retreated south." For now, he did not disagree. Moonridge would return, with more wolves, more authority, more interest in Hollow Fang. Annalise looked toward the cave wall. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come after me now?" Kyle's expression shifted slightly. He knew something. "What do they want?" she asked. "Tomorrow I'll show you." "That's not an answer. It's the one you get tonight." He drank from the water bowl. "I'm tired of your commands," she said. "I'm tired of finding you one mistake away from a broken door. That rogue never got in, because I arrived." Truth landed hard. Kyle set the bowl down. "Moonridge knows where you are now," he said. "They know you're alone. They know this cave matters enough for me to refuse them. And that helps me how? It doesn't." His gaze moved across the walls. "It makes you a target." The cabin felt colder. Annalise met his stare. "I already was." "No." The word cut clean. "Before, you were an exile on unused ground." He stepped closer. "Now you're the female Moonridge crossed a border to reclaim." The realization settled heavily. Rejected wolves disappeared quietly. Wanted wolves became problems. Kyle's gaze dropped again to her throat. "You will not stay here alone tomorrow night. This is my home. This is a half-built cabin in an exposed clearing. It has a door. That door would slow a child." Anger flashed hot. "I built it in one day, and it would still fail." She lifted her chin. "Then build a better one." Silence. Kyle studied her. Then something changed. Interest. Dark. Unexpected. "I might," he said. The words carried too much promise. Annalise ignored the way her pulse reacted. "You can't keep walking into my cabin as if you own it. I own the ground around it. That isn't the same. No." He stepped around the table, slow, deliberate. She pivoted to keep distance. "It's worse," he said. The words landed low. "Intimate." His gaze dipped briefly to her mouth. Then a howl split the night. Ironclaw, close, urgent. Kyle turned immediately. Another howl answered from farther along the ridge. Pack signal. Kyle grabbed his coat. "What happened?" Annalise asked. "Movement on the north line. Moonridge again?" "Maybe." He looked at her once more. "Do not leave this cabin. You know I hate when you say that." "Yes." He opened the door. Cold rushed inside. Kyle paused on the threshold. His eyes moved to the brace on the wall, to the knife in her hand, to the blood he had left drying on her floor. Then back to her. "Keep the fire lit." "Why?" "So I can scent my way back." He shifted instantly. The black wolf filled the doorway for one breath, then vanished into the storm. Annalise stood alone. Outside, wolves called across the mountains. Inside, Kyle's scent remained thick in the heat of her cabin, and beneath the table, one dark drop of his blood slid slowly between the stones, as if the cabin itself had begun keeping part of him. Chapter 6. The cabin did not quiet after Kyle left. His scent lingered in the heat. in the rough grain of the table where his hand had rested, in the drop of blood darkening the crack between the stones. Annalise stood beside the door. Outside, wolves called across the mountains. Ironclaw. Signals moved through the storm in clipped bursts. Snow hissed across the roof. Wind pressed against the walls. The new door held. For now. She fed the fire another length of pine. Flames climbed higher. Kyle wanted the fire burning so he could scent his way back. She hated that part of her listened for him already. Annalise crossed to the table and stared at the blood seeping into the stone seam. Moonridge had come for her. Kyle had killed at the border. Now something stirred along the north line. The valley had turned restless around her. She crouched and pressed cloth against the blood. When she lifted it, the stain remained, dark, permanent. Alpha blood had entered her home. She threw the cloth into the fire. It blackened instantly. Good. Let the evidence burn. She stirred the beans simmering above the flames, thin broth, barely food. Still she ate, standing, eyes on the door, fuel, nothing more. Snow thickened outside until the clearing vanished completely. Her world shrank to timber, stone, fire, and waiting. She hated waiting. Annalise checked the back wall, where the cabin joined the cave mouth. Wind slipped through one seam. She packed fresh mud and grass into the gap until the draft stopped. Then she checked the door brace, the hearthstones, the hatchet beside the bedroll. Every object had begun arranging itself around threat. She had lived here less than 2 weeks. Already the cave had learned it sheltered something hunted. A sound outside stopped her. No knock, no scrape, just the sudden stillness of wind against the wall. Annalise took the knife. The fire cracked softly. Then a low sound rolled through the door. Wolf, a breath against the wood. Her pulse stumbled. Kale. She knew before scent reached her. Snow, cedar, blood. Annalise lifted the bar. The door opened. The black wolf filled the threshold. Snow clung to his coat. Blood darkened one side of his muzzle. His eyes found her instantly. He stepped inside. Power entered with him. The cabin shrank. Annalise closed the door and dropped the bar. Kyle shifted. Bone rolled. Fur withdrew. A man replaced the wolf. Bare skin, black hair, fresh blood. A deeper cut marked his side near the hip. Another crossed his forearm. Melted snow ran over scars that already mapped older violence. Annalise tightened her jaw. "You're making this a habit." Kyle looked at the fire, then at her. "You keep opening the door. You keep bleeding on my floor." His gaze dropped briefly to the stones beneath the table. Recognition touched his expression. He looked back at her. The north line held. "That isn't what I asked. No." He stepped toward the hearth. The cabin shrank again. "What happened?" she asked. Kyle poured water over his forearm. Diluted blood ran across the dirt floor. "Rogues. 1, 4. She stared. "And you came back breathing?" Kyle lifted his eyes. "Yes." The answer landed flat. Annalise took a clean cloth and dipped it into hot water. "Sit." Kyle went still. The shift in power hit the room immediately. Her command. His earlier tone returned through her voice. He watched her a moment, then sat. Allowance, not obedience. Annalise stepped closer. The injuries looked worse near the fire. The bite mark along his forearm had torn deep. "You said rogues," she murmured. "They bite. You sound surprised, I noticed. You sound surprised, I noticed." His gaze remained on her face while she cleaned the wound. Fire behind them, storm outside. The alpha of Ironclaw seated in her cabin while she stood between his knees tending wounds earned in darkness. Annalise pressed the cloth harder. Kael's hand closed around her wrist. Warm, controlled, she froze. His grip tightened just enough to stop the pressure. "Useful," he said quietly, "does not require punishment." Heat rose into her throat. "I'm cleaning it. You were avenging yourself. Maybe both. Something dark moved in his eyes. Then he released her. That was worse. Annalise rinsed the cloth. "What changed on the north line?" she asked. Kyle leaned back slightly. "Moonridge pushed rumor south." She looked up. "What rumor?" "That hollow fang is empty. It isn't—" "No." His gaze dropped briefly to her mouth. "It isn't—" The repetition carried weight. Annalise continued cleaning the wound. "So rogues came for an empty cave, for shelter." His voice sharpened. "For supplies." Her hand stilled. "They know about the water." "Yes." The cave air seemed colder suddenly. The basin, the steady drip, stored warmth in the granite, winter shelter, value. Moonridge had not crossed the border for her alone. They had come for Hollow Fang. Annalise stepped back. "So now everyone wants what no one wanted." Kyle rose, abrupt. The air shifted. He stood too close when he straightened. "That is how land works," he said. "Worthless until someone strong survives on it." His gaze rested on her. The meaning held two edges. Annalise lifted her chin. "I was surviving before you arrived." "Yes." Agreement again. Sharp, unsoftened. Kyle pressed his fingers against the cut at his side. Fresh blood slicked his hand. Annalise swore under her breath. "Sit down." His brows lifted. "You command often. You bleed often." For a moment silence stretched. Then Kyle sat again. Annalise stepped close to clean the wound at his side. The space between them vanished. Her shoulder nearly brushed his chest. Heat rolled off him. Battle heat. Male heat. Her breathing changed first. Kyle noticed. His gaze dropped to her throat. Stayed there. The room narrowed. "What will Moonridge do?" she asked. "Return? With rogues? With claim?" The answer struck deeper. "They cast me out. They cast out a mouth," he said quietly. "They did not mean to cast out winter shelter." Pack arithmetic again. Annalise's hand stilled. Kyle took the cloth from her. Their fingers touched. A pulse struck both of them, immediate, deep. Kyle froze. The cloth hung between them. Fire cracked behind her. His eyes darkened. Something primal pushed against restraint. Annalise did not move. Neither did he. Then Kyle released the cloth and stood. Distance returned in a single step. "I'm sleeping here tonight," he said. "This is my cabin. This is an exposed target. You said tomorrow. It is tomorrow." She stared at him. The storm had buried the night deep enough to make him right. "You can't decide that. I already did." Anger flared. "This is why I hate when you speak like that." Kyle looked at her. "And this is why you're still alive." The truth landed hard. He crossed the room, checking the door brace, the hinges, the seams of the walls. "Territorial." Annalise folded her arms. "If you stay, you sleep on the floor." His gaze flicked to the bedroll. Then back to her. "Do you think I was asking for the bed?" Heat flooded her face. "You imply too much. You hear too much." She threw a blanket toward the far wall. "There." Kyle studied it, then placed it beside the wall with deliberate care. He added his coat over it. Extra warmth, practical. Annalise moved the knife beside her bedroll, the hatchet within reach. "Weapons near sleep." "You keep weapons beside you," he said. "I keep surviving beside me." Silence followed. When she looked back, his gaze rested on her. "Good," he said. One word, too much approval in it. The fire dimmed as the night deepened. Outside, the storm swallowed the mountains. Kyle sat against the wall. Even resting, he looked like a predator between hunts. Annalise lay down near the fire. Knife close, hatchet ready. Silence settled, aware. "You're still awake," Kyle said into the dark. "Yes." A pause. "Why did Varric come himself?" Kyle answered after a moment. because elders do not cross borders for caves alone. She turned toward him. What does that mean? It means Moonridge believes Hollow Fang holds more than water. Her chest tightened. What more? Kyle watched the fire, then looked at her. That, he said quietly, is what I'm taking you to see at first light. She pulled the blanket higher. You command too much, and you listen too little. Snow battered the roof. The fire cracked. Neither looked away. Then Kyle said quietly, Sleep, Annalise. The first time he spoke her name, the sound changed the room. Small, dangerous, irreversible. Annalise closed her eyes. Outside, the storm buried the clearing. Inside, firelight and alpha heat turned her cabin into a trap, holding two restless hearts. And at first light, Kyle would take her somewhere Moonridge had tried to reach first. Chapter 7. Annalise woke before dawn. The fire had burned low. Red coals pulsed beneath grey ash, giving the cabin just enough warmth to keep the frost from claiming it. Outside, the storm had ended. The silence afterward felt heavier. For a moment she forgot he was there. Then she felt him. Kyle, across the room, awake. Annalise opened her eyes. He sat against the far wall exactly where she had left him. One knee raised, one arm resting across it. Firelight cut a dull bronze line across his jaw and shoulder. His gaze was already on her. You're staring, she said. You were sleeping. The answer came quiet, steady. Annalise pushed herself upright and took the knife from beside her bedroll. Habit, signal, shield. Kyle's eyes flicked to the blade, then back to her face. You did not wake once. The words sounded too close to approval. I was tired. You were guarded. She disliked how easily he could read the difference. The cabin had grown colder during the night. Annalise fed 2 pieces of pine into the fire. Flames caught slowly, spreading orange light across the log walls. The room changed with that light, smaller, warmer, more dangerous. Kyle stood. The blanket slid from her shoulders as she rose at the same time. Her dress had twisted during the night. One side of the collar had slipped lower than it should. His gaze touched the exposed line of her shoulder once, then lifted, too late. Annalise fixed the fabric quickly. We leave now? She asked. Kyle reached for his coat. Yes. Work first. Safer. Annalise broke the remaining bread in 2 and held out 1 piece. You should eat before you start marching me into another cave. Kyle took the bread. His fingers brushed hers. A brief contact. The pulse that followed felt less brief. Annalise withdrew first. Kyle chewed once and looked toward the cave passage behind the cabin. Bring the hatchet. Why, you'll need both hands free when the stone narrows. Annalise frowned. Narrows to what? You'll see, again. That answer. She nearly argued. Then she noticed the deeper cut at his side had already tightened overnight. Alpha healing, relentless. He had fought through the storm, returned bleeding, stayed awake through the night, and now wanted to lead her deeper into the mountain. Whatever waited there mattered. She took the hatchet. Fine. Kyle opened the door. Cold air entered clean and sharp. The sky had shifted from black to iron grey. Snow lay thick across the clearing except for a circle of large wolf tracks around the cabin wall. Annalise noticed them. Of course he had circled. Kyle stepped into the clearing. She followed. Morning lay pale across Hollow Fang. Snow softened the ravine into quiet curves of whitened stone. Pine branches bent low beneath the storm's weight. The valley looked untouched. It was not. Kyle led her past the cabin toward the deeper passage hidden behind the outer cave chamber she had claimed. She had used only the first room. Water, storage, heat, enough to survive. She had not pushed deeper. Kyle did. The passage narrowed quickly. Torchlight slid over granite walls as they moved farther inside. The air cooled with every step. older, still. Water dripped somewhere ahead. Annalise's boots scraped stone worn smoother than the entrance floor. This isn't natural. Kyle glanced back. No. The passage bent left, then tightened. Annalise turned sideways to slip through the narrow gap. Stone pressed her shoulder and hip. The closeness stole breath. Kyle's hand came to the middle of her back, warm, steady. He guided her through the gap without force. When she cleared the narrow point, she stepped away too quickly. The torch shook once in her hand. You could have warned me. I did. That was not enough. No. The word carried a trace of quiet amusement. The passage opened suddenly. Annalise stopped. Torchlight spilled into a vast chamber. The ceiling rose high into darkness. Mineral veins caught the light faintly. Stone ledges stepped downward toward a still pool fed by the dripping spring. But that was not what stopped her breath. At the far end of the chamber stood carved stone pillars, old, weathered, marked with wolves. Annalise stepped forward slowly. Pack sigils covered the pillars, moon shapes, claw marks layered across older carvings. At the back wall, a large stone seat rose from the mountain itself. This was a den, she said. Kyle's voice came behind her. More than that. She turned. What? A claim seat. The words settled heavily. Annalise looked back at the chamber. This was not shelter. This was territory, ancient, important. This is why Varric came. Yes. She moved deeper into the cavern. Torchlight slid across carvings no pack in the valley had mentioned for generations. Or perhaps they had once, until the knowledge disappeared. One pillar carried a broken moon crest. Another showed an unfamiliar pack mark. Behind the stone seat, a larger carving remained mostly intact. A wolf head beneath a split moon. Annalise frowned. I don't know that crest. You wouldn't. Kyle joined her beside the pillars. The northern packs fractured long ago, before Ironclaw, before Moonridge. His voice carried easily in the cavern. This place belonged to one of the old high packs. A winter seat, protected water, hidden stone. Annalise studied the chamber again, a winter court, a gathering place, and she had built her cabin over its forgotten entrance. Why wasn't it claimed again? It vanished, Kyle said. It was buried after war and winter. Stories survived. Location did not. He looked at her. You found it because you stayed. The line landed harder than praise. Recognition. Annalise looked away first. Torchlight caught fresh claw marks along the right wall. Her body stiffened. These are new. Kyle crouched beside them. Rogues. They found this first. They found signs. And Moonridge? His eyes met hers. Moonridge knows enough. Enough. Always enough. Annalise moved toward the carved seat. The stone had been shaped directly from the mountain, broad enough for a wolf form to rest upon. She placed the torch into an old wall bracket. It fit perfectly. Someone had ruled here once. Often. Kyle watched her circle the seat. You brought me here so I would understand. Yes. And now what? He did not answer immediately. Kyle stood among the ancient pillars like a dark interruption in history. The cavern suited him. Alpha presence filled old places easily. Now, he said, you decide whether this remains shelter. Annalise folded her arms. It already belongs to me. Yes, his voice lowered. I'm talking about what comes next. The air tightened. What would it become? A claim. The word landed heavy. Annalise felt her pulse change. She forced distance. This cave was deeded to me already, yes. His gaze sharpened. I mean the seat. She looked at the stone throne behind her, then back at him. You expect me to challenge two packs because they remembered land has value? Kyle stepped closer. You expect yourself to keep thinking like prey. The words struck hard. Annalise lifted her chin. I survived exile. Yes, agreement again. You built a door in one day. raised a wall with split hands. He stopped in front of her. That is not prey. Heat flashed through her, anger, defiance, something darker that wanted his approval. Annalise stepped aside. And yet everyone keeps deciding what I need, because everyone sees what this place is now. She laughed once. Sharp. They see what I made visible. Yes. The word carried force. She turned back to the carved crest. What do you want from me? Kyle answered behind her. I want you to hold what you found. That sounds simple. It isn't. Then say the hard part. Silence stretched. Water dripped into the pool. Finally he said, if you hold this seat, Hollow Fang stops being forgotten ground. She turned. What does it become? A territory others will test. The warning settled deep. Annalise studied the chamber again. Stone seat, ancient pillars, water. Every path forward led through her. And you, she said, what do you become in that? Kyle did not move, the wolf standing between you and the first challenge. The answer struck like a thrown blade. Annalise's heart beat once, hard. And after that? Kyle's gaze dropped briefly to her mouth, then returned. We see who remains standing. The words should have chilled her. They did. They did something else too. A sound broke across the chamber, stones scraping in the narrow passage. Both turned. Kyle shifted forward instantly. His body blocked half the cavern. Annalise grabbed the hatchet. Another sound. A low laugh echoed from the entrance. Male, confident. Well, the voice drawled from the darkness. Now I see why Moonridge crossed a border. Firelight trembled against ancient stone. Kyle did not move. Annalise stood behind him with torchlight and steel, the old claim seat at her back. Whoever had entered Hollow Fang had not come for shelter. He had come because the mountain was no longer forgotten. Chapter 8. The cavern went still. Kyle stood between Annalise and the narrow passage. His shoulders squared. His weight settled forward, balanced and ready. Firelight stretched his shadow across the ancient pillars. The laugh came again from the darkness. Closer, bootsteps scraped stone. A man stepped into the chamber, tall, lean, dark beard, winter-scarred coat thrown over broad shoulders. His eyes moved across the cavern slowly, the pillars, the seat, the pool. Then Kyle. Recognition sharpened his grin. Ironclaw's Alpha guarding forgotten stone, he said. Kyle did not answer. Annalise tightened her grip on the hatchet. The stranger noticed. His gaze slid toward her. Interest flared. So the rumors were right. His eyes moved over her once, measured, calculated, then back to Kyle. You found something worth defending. Kyle spoke quietly. Leave. The man laughed. A poor welcome for a wolf who crossed half a mountain to meet you. You crossed my border. And you killed 2 of my scouts. The air cooled. Annalise felt the shift ripple through Kyle's stance. Predator tension. Contained violence. They attacked first, Kyle said. The man shrugged. They were curious. His gaze moved toward the carved seat behind Annalise. Now I understand why. Annalise shifted slightly. The stranger's grin widened. You're the exile who built the cabin. She said nothing. He tilted his head. You survive exile and uncover a throne. His gaze sharpened. That's rare. Kyle moved half a step forward, enough to block the man's view. Speak your purpose. The grin faded. My name is Darius. The name carried weight. Even Annalise recognized it. Rogue leader, border raider, wolf who held territory without pack law. Darius spread his hands. You uncovered something valuable. Kyle stayed still. Darius continued. Old packs ruled from seats like this. His gaze flicked toward Annalise, claiming it will draw every wolf in the north. Annalise already understood that. Kyle said nothing. Darius smiled slowly. So I came to offer a solution. Kyle's voice lowered. You came to negotiate? Yes. Darius stepped toward the center of the chamber. My wolves control the southern ridges. His eyes shifted between them. You control the north. Then he nodded toward Annalise. She holds the seat. The air tightened. Darius spread his hands again. We divide protection. Kyle's expression hardened. You want access. I want stability. You want power. Darius's smile returned. Every wolf here does. Annalise felt Kyle's tension sharpen. Then he answered, No. The word echoed through the chamber. Darius exhaled slowly. I expected that. His gaze shifted toward Annalise. Which is why I came to speak with the wolf who owns the throne. Kyle's body changed instantly. Danger moved through the room. Careful, he said quietly. Darius ignored him. His gaze rested on Annalise. You know what this place means? Yes. You know Moonridge will return? Yes. You know Ironclaw cannot guard you forever. The words lingered. Annalise studied him. Darius was dangerous, not reckless, calculated. He had entered a cavern with an alpha and expected to walk out again. Why help me? She asked. Darius smiled faintly. Because chaos feeds wolves like me. Raw honesty. Kyle's voice cut through the chamber. She doesn't need your help. Darius chuckled. Every ruler needs wolves willing to spill blood. His eyes flicked toward Kyle. You know that. Silence stretched. The ancient chamber listened. Annalise looked between them. Alpha, rogue king. Two predators built for war, both watching her, not as prey, as the center. Her pulse steadied. You're both wrong, she said. Darius's brow lifted. Kyle's gaze sharpened. Annalise stepped forward. Torchlight followed her. I didn't uncover this place to become someone's prize. Darius's smile deepened. Good. Kyle stayed silent. Annalise glanced at him, then back to the rogue. You came because you think I'll need soldiers. Yes. You're right. Darius's grin widened. Then she finished. But I won't use yours. The grin faded. Kyle's attention sharpened. Annalise lifted the torch toward the ancient crest above the seat. This place belonged to wolves who ruled the north. Her voice carried across the cavern. I won't divide it before it belongs to me. Silence dropped heavy. Darius studied her, long, carefully. Then he laughed, low, real. That answers everything. His gaze shifted toward Kyle. You chose well, Kyle finally spoke. I didn't choose. His eyes moved to Annalise. She survived. The words settled deep in the chamber. Darius nodded once. Fair. He turned toward the passage, then paused. One last look over his shoulder. When Moonridge returns, he said calmly, the North will decide whether she becomes queen or corpse. His gaze rested on Annalise. Either way, his grin returned. It will be interesting. Then he disappeared into the passage. Silence returned slowly. The cavern seemed larger. Annalise released a breath. Kyle remained still, watching the entrance, listening. Only after several seconds did the tension ease. He won't attack here, Kyle said. Why? He respects strength. Annalise lowered the torch. He respects opportunity. Kyle finally turned toward her. Their eyes met across the chamber. You handled him well. Did I? Yes. She studied him. You expected hesitation. No. His gaze moved toward the stone seat. I expected caution. Annalise folded her arms. I've hesitated enough. Kyle stepped closer. The cavern tightened. You didn't hesitate tonight. No. Why? She held his gaze. Because I realized something. What? Her voice lowered. If this place becomes war, she gestured toward the throne behind her, then I'd rather stand on the seat. Silence stretched. Kyle's eyes darkened slightly. Approval, respect, something deeper. He looked toward the throne, then back to her. Then you need to learn how to hold it. Annalise lifted her chin. Teach me. The words landed softly, heavy with consequence. Kyle studied her, then nodded once. The motion carried quiet authority. Outside, storm clouds began to break. Pale morning light filtered into the cavern mouth. Hollow Fang was no longer forgotten, and the wolves of the north would soon learn who had claimed it. Chapter 9. Morning reached Hollow Fang slowly. Cold light slid into the cavern mouth and stretched across the stone floor. Dust drifted through the beam. Annalise stood beside the carved seat. She had not moved for several minutes. The torch burned low in its wall bracket. Kyle remained near the passage entrance, listening to the mountain. Neither spoke. Silence carried weight. Annalise broke it. Moonridge will come. Kyle nodded once. Yes. How many? Enough. The answer held no comfort. Annalise placed her hand on the stone arm of the seat. Cold. Ancient. A throne buried beneath her cabin. Forgotten until she survived long enough to reveal it. They'll challenge, she said. Yes. Kyle's voice carried easily through the chamber. They will test whether this seat has a ruler. Annalise turned toward him. And you? His eyes lifted. What about me? Where do you stand when they come? The question settled between them. Kyle studied her. Then he moved. Bootsteps echoed across the stone. One step, then another. He stopped before the ancient seat. His gaze lifted to the split moon crest carved above it, then returned to her. I stand where I always do, which is between my territory and the wolves trying to take it. Annalise folded her arms. You said this was my territory. Yes, then you're standing between them and me. Kyle did not deny it. That sounds like protection, she said. It is. The honesty struck harder than denial would have. Why? Kyle held her gaze. Because you chose to stand. He gestured toward the cavern. You built shelter here. His voice lowered. You uncovered the seat. Another step brought him closer. You refused a rogue king. Silence stretched. You refused your pack. Annalise's pulse shifted. Kyle stopped in front of her. And you're still standing. The words settled deep in the chamber. That earns protection. Annalise watched him carefully. You sound like a wolf who has already chosen. Kyle's eyes darkened. I did. Her breath slowed. When I killed the first wolf who crossed your border. The answer landed clean. Annalise turned toward the seat again. If I claim this place, she said, Moonridge will challenge it. Yes, they'll bring Varric. Yes, they'll bring their alpha. Yes. Annalise exhaled slowly. That becomes war. Kyle shook his head slightly. It becomes a test. She looked back at him. And if I lose, they take the seat. The answer carried no softness. Annalise nodded once. Then she stepped onto the stone throne. The cavern reacted to the movement. The seat lifted her above the chamber floor. Torchlight stretched her shadow across the pillars. Kyle watched without speaking. Annalise turned toward the entrance. If they want it, she said quietly, they'll take it from me. Kyle's expression shifted. Approval sharpened his gaze. He stepped closer. You understand what that means? Yes. They will not challenge the stone. Annalise looked down at him. They will challenge me. Yes. Silence returned. Then Kyle said, Good. The word echoed softly through the cavern. Annalise's brow lifted. That isn't reassuring. It isn't meant to be. He met her gaze. It means you are finally thinking like the wolf who belongs there. The words stirred something deep inside her. For the first time since exile, the stone beneath her feet felt steady, not shelter, power. Kyle studied her a moment longer. Then his voice lowered. You should understand one more thing. When Moonridge challenges this seat? His gaze sharpened. They will not challenge you alone. Annalise frowned. Why? Kyle stepped closer, close enough that she could see the faint scar crossing his collarbone. Because if you hold that throne, he looked up at her. You stand inside my border. The meaning settled slowly, then struck all at once. Annalise's pulse jumped. They'll challenge Ironclaw. Yes. She stared at him. You're starting war over my cave. Kyle's expression hardened. No. He gestured around the cavern. Over this. His eyes returned to her. And the wolf who proved strong enough to claim it. Silence filled the chamber. A distant howl rolled faintly through the mountain. Moonridge. Annalise heard it. So did Kyle. Their eyes met. They're coming, she said. Yes. Annalise stepped down from the throne. The stone felt colder when she left it. She moved toward him. The distance disappeared. What happens now? She asked quietly. Kyle looked toward the cavern entrance, then back at her. Now we see who deserves the throne. His voice lowered. And who survives the challenge? The words settled heavy in the chamber. Above them, Hollow Fang waited, and the wolves of the north were already moving toward it. Chapter 10. The wolves arrived before noon. Annalise heard them before she saw them. The mountain carried the rhythm of paws across snow long before the tree line moved. Many wolves, disciplined, Moonridge. She stood at the cave mouth beside Kael. Below them, the clearing lay silent beneath pale winter light. Her cabin crouched at the cliff base like a scar against the stone. Ironclaw wolves had gathered already. 10, large, still, watching the forest. Annalise noticed something immediately. They stood behind Kael, not beside him, behind, acknowledging rank, acknowledging alpha. The forest shifted. Grey wolves stepped from the tree line, one after another. Moonridge, more than Ironclaw. At their center walked a massive silver wolf, the Moonridge Alpha. Behind him came Elder Varric. Annalise felt old anger rise. The last time she faced these wolves, they cast her out like winter refuse. Now they climbed her mountain. Kael moved slightly forward, not blocking her, standing beside her. That mattered. Moonridge halted halfway across the clearing. The silver wolf shifted first. Bones rolled. Fur withdrew. A man stood where the wolf had been. Broad shoulders, cold eyes. Alpha power rolled through the clearing. Kael. His voice carried easily up the cliff. You placed Ironclaw between Moonridge and our exile. Kael answered calmly. She's no longer yours. The Alpha's gaze lifted. He saw Annalise. Recognition flickered. Then something colder. You survived. Annalise met his stare. Yes. The Alpha's lip curled faintly. You should have left the mountain. I built a home. You built a problem. Kael spoke before she continued. You crossed my border. The Moonridge Alpha's eyes snapped back to him. That cave belongs to Moonridge history. It belongs to the wolf who uncovered it. Silence spread across the clearing. Elder Varric stepped forward. His voice cut thin through the cold air. That seat belonged to the High Packs. His gaze fixed on Annalise. You have no right to claim it. Annalise stepped forward. The cliff edge dropped sharply behind her. She did not hesitate. I survived on that stone while your pack forgot it. Her voice carried clearly across the clearing. I bled building shelter there. Moonridge wolves shifted. Annalise continued. You rejected me because I was weak. Her gaze hardened. So come test that. The clearing went silent. The Moonridge Alpha studied her. Then he laughed once, low, satisfied. There it is. He glanced toward Kael. You turned an exile into a challenger. Kael's voice remained level. She turned herself. The Alpha looked back at Annalise. You want the throne? Yes. You understand the law? Yes, if you sit the seat. His voice sharpened. You defend it? Annalise held his gaze. I know. The Alpha nodded. Then we settle it now. The words rippled through both packs. Ironclaw wolves stiffened. Moonridge leaned forward. The Alpha gestured toward the clearing. Come down. Kyle shifted beside her. His voice dropped low. You don't have to fight him. Yes, she said. I do. Kyle watched her a moment, then stepped aside. The gesture carried weight. Annalise descended the path alone. Snow crunched beneath her boots. The clearing widened. Moonridge wolves watched with predatory focus. She stopped at the center. The Moonridge Alpha studied her. You understand the cost? Yes. You lose, you die. Yes. The answer remained steady. The Alpha nodded. Then he shifted. The transformation exploded across the clearing. A massive silver wolf stood where the man had been. Muscle, fur, teeth. Annalise dropped the hatchet. She closed her eyes briefly. Her wolf rose beneath her skin, smaller than his, but steady. She shifted. Bone rolled. Fur burst through skin. When the pain ended, a dark wolf stood in the snow. The clearing held its breath. The silver wolf attacked first, fast, violent. Annalise twisted aside. Snow exploded beneath their paws. The Alpha circled, testing. She held her ground. Second attack. Closer. Teeth snapped near her shoulder. Annalise struck back. Precision. Her teeth closed around his foreleg. The silver wolf snarled. Surprise rippled through the clearing. Kyle did not move. Ironclaw watched with absolute focus. The Alpha lunged again. Harder. Annalise slid aside, bit again. The fight stretched longer than expected. Then the Alpha slowed. A single mistake. A shift of weight. Annalise lunged. Her teeth closed around his throat. Not deep enough to kill. Deep enough to hold. The clearing froze. The silver wolf stopped moving. Seconds passed. Then Annalise released him. Both wolves stepped back. The Alpha shifted first, human again, breathing hard. Blood marked his throat. He stared at her. Then he laughed. Short. Respectful. You didn't kill me. You didn't kill me either. The Alpha nodded. Then he turned toward both packs. Witness. His voice carried across the clearing. This wolf holds hollow fang. Moonridge wolves shifted uneasily. None challenged. The Alpha looked back at Annalise. You sit the seat now. Then his gaze moved briefly to Kyle. And the north changes. Moonridge turned. They left the clearing without another word. Silence lingered. Then Ironclaw wolves stepped forward. Not threatening, acknowledging. Kyle remained near the tree line, watching her. Annalise walked back up the path. When she reached him, the wind lifted strands of her hair. Well, she said quietly, that escalated. The corner of Kyle's mouth moved. You won. Annalise glanced toward the cave behind them. No, she said. We did. Kyle studied her. The bond between them tightened. For the first time since the pack doors slammed behind her, Annalise no longer stood as an exile. She stood as the wolf who held the mountain. Chapter 11. The Claim. Evening settled over Hollow Fang. The mountain had grown quiet. Moonridge wolves vanished into the southern forest hours earlier. Ironclaw patrols still moved along the ridges, but their tension had eased. The challenge was finished. Annalise stood outside her cabin. Snow reflected the last orange light of sunset across the clearing. The cliff behind her rose dark and solid, hiding the ancient seat within its stone. Her seat. The idea had begun to settle. Several Ironclaw wolves remained in the clearing. They watched her openly now. Curiosity had faded. Respect replaced it. Kyle stood near the tree line, still, watching her the same way he had since the fight ended. Annalise walked toward him. Snow crunched beneath her boots. You've been staring all day, she said. I've been observing. That sounds like staring. The corner of his mouth moved. You won. She shrugged. I survived. Kyle shook his head slightly. That wasn't survival. Annalise tilted her head. What was it? Authority. The words settled between them. She glanced toward the cliff. I didn't expect the Alpha to yield. He respected the law. He respected the fight. Kyle stepped closer. Both, the space between them tightened. Annalise noticed something then. The Ironclaw wolves had moved farther away. They had not left. They were giving distance. She looked back at Kyle. That was deliberate. Yes. They're waiting. Yes. Her brow lifted. For what? Kyle studied her for several seconds. The next decision. Annalise folded her arms. What decision? Kyle glanced toward the cliff. The seat needs a ruler. That would be me. Yes. His voice remained steady. But the North does not follow lone wolves. Understanding arrived quickly. You're talking about a pack? Yes. And an alpha? Yes. Silence stretched. The meaning behind his words settled fully. Annalise's pulse changed. You're not offering Ironclaw protection. No. Kyle stepped closer. Close enough that the scar across his jaw caught the fading light. I'm offering something else. Annalise's voice lowered. What? Kyle held her gaze. Partnership. The word carried weight. Annalise exhaled slowly. That sounds like an alliance. It is. And what does Ironclaw gain? Kyle's expression shifted slightly. Stability. Her brow lifted. That's the political answer. Yes, and the honest one. Kyle stepped closer. Only inches remained between them. You. The word landed quietly. Its weight did not. Annalise's breath slowed. You crossed a border for my cave. Kyle shook his head. I crossed it for the wolf who refused to leave it. Her pulse quickened. You keep saying things like that. Yes. Why? Kyle's gaze moved briefly to her throat, then returned to her eyes. Because the bond stopped letting me ignore it. The clearing stilled. Annalise felt it too, the tension beneath her ribs, the pull that had followed them through every fight and argument. You felt it that early, she said. Yes, and you said nothing. Yes, that's frustrating. I hoped it would fade. She studied him. Did it? No. The honesty disarmed her. Annalise looked toward the cliff. The ancient seat waited inside the mountain, her throne, her territory, her future. Then she looked back at Kyle. And now? Kyle's voice lowered. Now the North will expect an alpha beside the wolf who holds Hollow Fang. And you think that should be you? Yes. Her brow lifted again. That sounds arrogant. It is. Silence returned. Annalise stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat coming off him. You're assuming I would accept. Kyle's voice dropped. No. What are you assuming? That you're strong enough to refuse? The answer surprised her. Then a faint smile touched her mouth. That's an interesting strategy. It's honest. Annalise studied him. The alpha who had crossed a border, killed for her land, stood beside her in the challenge, waited for her decision. The bond stirred again, quiet. Relentless, she stepped closer. The distance disappeared. You're right about one thing. What? The North won't follow a lone wolf. Kyle held still. And the other thing? What? Annalise's voice softened. The bond isn't fading. Kyle's eyes darkened. No. She lifted her hands slowly. Her fingers brushed his jaw. The contact sparked through her nerves. I suppose that makes this simpler. Kyle's voice roughened. How? Annalise smiled faintly. If the North expects an alpha beside me, she stepped closer. It might as well be the one who kept arriving at my door bleeding. Kyle's hand moved to her waist. Firm, controlled. You're accepting? Yes. His breath slowed. You understand what that means? Yes. Wind moved across the clearing. Ironclaw wolves watched in silence. Annalise held his gaze. Then she kissed him. The bond tightened instantly. Not explosive, certain. Kyle's arms closed around her. Snow scent and wolf heat mixed in the cold air. Behind them, Ironclaw wolves lifted their heads. One by one they howled. The sound rolled across the ridges. A declaration, a new order. Annalise pulled back slowly. Kyle studied her. The North will call you Queen. She smiled faintly. They can call me whatever they want. Kyle's brow lifted. What do you call yourself? Annalise looked toward the mountain, toward the ancient throne hidden in stone. Then back at him. The wolf who refused to leave. Kyle's mouth shifted slightly. Approval. Above them the first stars appeared. Hollow Fang was no longer forgotten, and the exile they cast out had become something far more dangerous. She had become the wolf who ruled the mountain. Epilogue. The wolf who stayed. The pack doors opened. The sound rolled across the Moonridge courtyard. Annalise stood at the base of the stone steps. Snow drifted through the air in slow spirals. The courtyard carried the sense of iron, wolf fur, and pine smoke. The place had not changed. The wolves had. Moonridge lined the courtyard walls, silent, watching. The same wolves who had stood here months earlier when the doors slammed behind her. Now they waited. Annalise stepped forward. Her boots struck stone with steady rhythm. Kyle walked beside her. Not leading. Not behind, beside. Ironclaw wolves followed several paces back. Their presence stretched across the courtyard like a quiet warning. Moonridge wolves shifted. The packhouse doors remained open. The Moonridge Alpha stepped outside. Silver hair. Broad shoulders. The scar from their fight marked his throat. His eyes settled on Annalise. You returned. Annalise stopped at the base of the steps. Yes. You crossed a border. Yes. The Alpha studied her. Then his gaze moved briefly to Kyle. You brought Ironclaw, Kyle answered calmly. She didn't need bringing. The Alpha's mouth shifted slightly. Understanding. He looked back at Annalise. What do you want? The courtyard held its breath. Annalise lifted her chin. Nothing. A murmur moved through the wolves. The Alpha's brow lifted. You came here for nothing. I came so you could see. See what? Annalise held his gaze. That exile didn't end me. Her voice carried across the courtyard. You told me to make my own hunt. The words settled over the pack. So I did. The Alpha studied her. Long. Carefully. His gaze flicked briefly toward the Ironclaw wolves behind her. You claimed Hollow Fang? Yes. You defeated me? Yes. The Alpha nodded slowly. Then he stepped down from the packhouse. Moonridge wolves shifted as he passed through them. He stopped in front of Annalise. For a moment neither spoke. Then the Alpha turned toward his pack. His voice carried across the courtyard. Witness, silence deepened. This wolf left Moonridge in exile. His gaze returned to Annalise. She returns as ruler. The words moved through the courtyard like wind through dry leaves. Moonridge wolves lowered their heads. Recognition. The Alpha stepped back. Moonridge will respect the seat of Hollow Fang. Annalise nodded once. That's all I came for. The Alpha's gaze moved briefly toward Kyle. And Ironclaw, Kyle answered calmly. Ironclaw stands where it always has. The Alpha studied them both. Then he stepped aside. The courtyard opened. Invitation. Annalise did not enter. She turned away. Kyle fell into step beside her. They walked out of the courtyard together. No one stopped them. No one challenged. Behind them, the Moonridge wolves watched in silence. At the forest edge, Kyle spoke quietly. You didn't need to come here. Yes. Annalise said. I did. Why, she looked back once at the pack-house doors. The girl who stood here months ago needed to see it. Kyle studied her. And what did she see? Annalise turned toward the mountains, toward Hollow Fang, toward the seat waiting inside the stone, that she never needed them. Kyle's hand closed around hers as they walked, firm, certain. Above them the wind carried the distant howls of Ironclaw across the ridges. The north had begun to change, and at the center of that change walked the wolf Moonridge cast out, the wolf who stayed, the wolf who ruled the mountain.